All right, I'm back with this another one. But so what I wanted to say is that if you take like you might have like different like you probably I imagine like anyone watching this, you've had different conversations with people like in a living room or maybe at a party, but it would change the tone of the party. It might not be what people went to the party for, but you have conversations about like what's justice, what's right and wrong, what's the system, what's the man, what's the struggle, what's oppression, stuff like that. Sometimes you can talk like that with people, and you might talk about like moral terms, like this and that is so wrong, and this is, and you start to sound like a little bit self-righteous, or maybe even take postures, and then you have like similar conversation like that on online spaces where sometimes it'll get around to like discussing like um uh the dynamics of like social justice in general, but social justice. But all I meant to say is that I think any form of justice, whether that be social justice, legal justice, you're not getting anywhere until you put it in economic terms. I don't think we're getting on, because how are we putting gas in the car? How are we getting down the road anywhere until we speak in economic terms? They say that that's actually where it crossed the line, like with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King was doing for us. So he was able to win the influence and the collective consciousness of an entire people and time period to move in the right direction, in a better direction, in the human direction. And then when he got on, because he didn't stop with that, as he got on to talking about the economic, because I guess maybe the social attitudes had been like that had been like the wicked film laying on top of the wicked reality, had been those attitudes of being like the film on that, and it informed that and it kept it viable, and that was real that he got to that point. But the real meat, the real mechanics of it, and the reality of it, of the justice and injustice, had still been economics. Economic equity is what had been at stake, and informs all other forms of inequity. That is justice and injustice. Inequity is more potent than injustice, because injustice is yet a form of inequity, but inequity had yet set the parameters and circumstance and the viability of what becomes injustice, I think. But so we're more so not getting anywhere, I don't think, until we speak in economic terms, and that might do with a lot of things. So, but then you take about like what about like so like you take the Native American people in the United States, the people indigenous to the geographical region of the United States, suffered loss of people and suffering, but you can't take their suffering isolated from the loss of the buffalo in the United States. The amount, the lack, the dearth of buffalo that we see in the United States is not isolated from or different from the lack of indigenous people that we get to experience in life living in the United States. And I think that that whatever they were suffering at that time, because we can't actually imagine what life would have been like. I know what kind of hell I'm going through right now. I don't know how harder it would have been in older times. The iterations of like technology and social life would have been very difficult back then. But you can imagine there was great inequity attending all levels of the suffering, and that we don't have as many Native American people with us today would have been attended by that. The entire struggle would have been attended by inequity, especially as it goes to sustenance and what our means of livelihood, enjoying life, but also furthering life. You can't take that away from sustenance. Before we had this fiat, this fake money, this fake news called money, we had like animals and buffalo in the land and stuff like that. So to assault the buffalo, to ravish, to assault the buffalo, to over consume the buffalo so as that they cannot reproduce themselves. The people who derive their life and their sustenance from the buffalo, and by that means can be appreciated as also the buffalo, would have to pay a penalty for that. And then so the real, you could maybe say that the real genocide of the Native Americans had actually been the genocide of the buffalo. You could reason that, and I don't mean to speak, I don't mean to be atrocious or arrogant to speak outside of my experience, because I can't speak for another people and what they've experienced. But I know that the people that I come from, my father, suffered similarly an actual genocide order that was carried out to different degrees, and that we lost thousands of people, not to the same order of magnitude as the Native Americans, because our people hadn't been that big, but with our people in Southwest Africa, the Herero and the Nama, at least, not counting other people that would have been in the area, you're talking about like maybe like 60 to 80,000, roughly speaking. The only reference I know to that atrocity that would be an accurate, detailed atrocity of what I'm speaking of is a book called The Blue Book. That was a book that was a German that was a book a German documentation of the actual atrocities that Germany inflicted on the region of Southwest Africa, now called Namibia, after the Namib Desert having won independence ostensibly. I think in the 50s is when the name Namibia came, but it had been Southwest Africa, German Southwest Africa before that. And just a reference for what I'm talking in this video would be something called the Blue Book. And actually, I think I had a couple ancestors that feature in that book. One was a reverend. I had a ancestor named Sam, I think. He was a reverend. And then he was consulted for some of the statistics that they needed about the people that were lost in that time. And then I also had a grandfather. I think his name is Kavedemba. I think he's my my grandmother's my paternal grandmother's either father or grandfather was this man named Kavedemba, and he was supposed to be like a warrior, more so of like a sniper that put up a fight when his people were being genocided. And then he was captured, and I think he was supposed to be executed. But there was a turn of events, a uncanny turn of events that would make a person wonder about like providence and coincidence that got him out of that situation. And he was I think they wanted him to be a leader of some kind, like a chieftain, but he wasn't interested in that. He was just more so of a killer and a soldier. And so some people, I think some researchers were contacting my father about that, about the history of that. But that's what I'm talking about, is the Blue Book. And so along that reasoning, my father said that a lot of that was sparked off that contention, and what that contention had been about the whole time was largely about cattle, because the people were being displaced and disenfranchised from their own land, the German Southwest Africa. But especially their cattle had been the point of contention within all that. That is their livelihood, their sustenance, their means of supporting themselves. I think that in Southeast Asia, like around like Vietnam, you had it wouldn't be animals the same way, because I don't know that they didn't have the same relationship with meat. I don't think that like the Native Americans would have, and the people where I come from would have, because of the dynamics of the land were different, of how they would survive on that land. So it had been more about like I think like you would have like issues of like sharecropping in rice in Southeast Asia, and then a different economic injustice and violence that was a point of marginalizing the people in like Vietnam, Southeast Asia. That might go broader than Vietnam, but you had like sharecropping, like modern neo-feudalism is what they were experiencing. And I can only imagine what kind of inequity they were going through, what would get them to the point of picking up arms. You have people that they're content to live with the most humble of means, the most subsistence of means, the most rigor of labor had been like maybe the lifestyle, like, because a lot of human life living going back through centuries, we weren't having all these lavish extravagances that yet cost one another and the land to this day. We weren't indulging that, but they were humble, and they were surviving in those terms. And I would say that it would took a lot of inequity to get to the point of taking up arms. So it wasn't so much, I don't think it was necessarily that even the people of Southeast Asia or the people of the Native Americans of the United States, or like the people that my family comes from and my ancestor Kavedemba were so formidable and brutal and lethal, is that they had been pressed that hard. You press someone that hard, and what else can there be? You press someone like that. So now in the United States, we don't have the same reliance on the land and the animals like we would in nature, but we have like representative currency, finance, stuff like that. But some of us are still getting disenfranchised as bad as I can imagine they would. I recently purchased a car for $5,000, had it shipped to me for $6,000. It arrived with no transmission. I had to pay $400 to have it looked at and find out that it had a bad transmission, and then I got it taken back off my hands. And because I was out of work that long, because that's what I used to work, I couldn't foot the note, and that's how I got killed. And then I got another vehicle, and when I paid for the training for that vehicle, I had my money for the training stolen the same way. So we're still living the same thing.